Hi guys. Okay, welcome. Steph, we finally made it. I'm actually gonna start with that.
I know, right?
I forgot to tell you.
This has
Yeah,
been like a month delayed. Is that
yeah, that was
feminine sensory
totally my
timeline?
fault. That
Nah.
was totally my fault. We'll get into that. But welcome to the
Thank you.
RegiCast. Okay, I'm your host Reginald. Joining me is Steph. Hi, Steph.
How's it going?
Good, good. So let's first do this. All the relevant stuff's in the description. Okay. Steph's type, all that fun stuff. We're gonna get into it. It's been a while since we last talked about what we talked about. But I'm definitely looking forward to going back into some of these topics with you. So we'll just go ahead and get started as is tradition. Okay, we're gonna start with our first impressions. Okay, so you share yours and I'll share mine.
Yeah. So I believe my first impression of you came straight from Discord. I was about to get my official type from Dave and Shan and thought I would engage with the community a little bit more. I had been lurking for forever. But I wanted to kind of like see what's going on. And so when I finally introduced myself with my official type on Facebook, that people would kind of at least know who I am in some regard. So I think I jumped onto the voice chat and you were already there. And everyone was super friendly. You were super friendly. First impressions was like, I like Regi. I like that he's putting himself out there. And then that first impression grew to, when you started posting a little bit more. And I was like, good for him. Like, yeah. I also thought that we were the same type. So
Really?
my guess
Oh,
going in
yeah.
was NET. Turns out I'm SETE. We can also talk about that a little bit later.
Yeah,
So
pretty close.
I was looking out for, like, do we have the same vibes? I was like, because I think you had a chat with Evelyn. There was like a episode on her show, her podcast for all the NETs, right?
Yeah.
So it was like, oh, like,
Were you
do we
vibing?
have the same functions? Question mark.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, what when you were watching that, what made you think that?
Um, it's not necessarily through watching you guys. It was more connecting the dots. I was very certain I was gather over organize. It was the intuition versus sensory that was a little bit difficult. But it's because my sensory is feminine, and so
Mm,
FSE can look a lot like NE.
yeah.
And my intuition is masculine, so I could feel that, like weight of intuition and like wanting the patterns and like feeling like I have the spectrum, but I don't. So
Yeah. Yeah. Trust me, you don't want this. You don't want any problems. Any is the most ridiculous savior function of all time. It's just not worth it.
hmm
It's just not. And yet I do it all the time. It's ridiculous. So I'm glad you have SE. Actually, you're fortunate. You've been blessed. Okay. My first impression. It's actually funny. I think I remember us talking on the Discord, and I think one of my first impressions, I thought you were SITE, I think. Because so there's in the Discord, there's that testing room, right? And you
yes.
were always in there solving problems. And you were like, hey, I did this, and hey, solved this, and hey, I solved this. I was like, oh, okay, she's organized. Like in my naive understanding of the functions, like, oh, okay, she's organizing the Discord,
Yep.
And so that was my initial impression of like, being OI, but maybe more extroverted. I think when we had some of our conversations, I mean, I don't think we had a lot, but like, yeah, you're
Mm-mm.
super friendly. But then I think where my impression really started solidifying was when we did our pre-call and when we met in person.
Yeah.
You have a very, it's like a very expansive, bubbly vibe. Like, yeah, hi. Like, it's like, which is, I like it. I don't think I've told you that, but I genuinely enjoy it. It's one of those things that it just like helps me relax. I don't know if I've ever told you that, but like it's just very relaxing. So that's my first impression. Hopefully that was not too weird.
Yeah, no, thank you. I mean,
But yeah.
I so pre-OP, I do have a story behind like the willingness to at least try to create space for other people as a first step. It's because I've had actually, I would say like three of my friendships, they have like come back years later and told me, you know how we first became friends, right? I was like, what are you talking about? One of it was a friend that I've known since we were 6, but we didn't actually, hang out until we were 8. And apparently that first interaction was we were sat next to each other in class assignments. And the first day of school, apparently everyone's a little nervous, and maybe the double decider me was not. And so it was time for recess. We put our chairs away. I looked at her. I was like, "So, are you coming for lunch?" Like, it was just like assuming that we're gonna hang out, and she was like, "Oh, okay." So that was like a really early childhood thing. And then later on, one of the friends that I made in high school, I switched to a brand new high school. When I say brand new, I mean the school. I was part of the first batch of students to actually start. Talk about, new.
Yeah.
And one of the friends that I clicked with early on was when we met at the testing center, and I just said, "Hi, I'm Steph." I was nervous, but like based on that early story of my friend saying that helped, I just introduced myself and was like, "Here I am." Do we have vibes or not?
Yeah.
And so it's something I've semi-consciously carried with me whenever there are new environments and meeting new people. And then the third story would be in college, like literally, orientation week. We hung, like, there was a group of people, and there was a trivia game, and there were these people at the same table, and I was enjoying myself, and I was like, "Fred, I like you." And he was like, "I like you too, Steph." Like, that was how we started to hang out. So I've been able to take risks in that way, and it's paid off, and so I'll continue to do it.
Nice. I feel like I tried to do that, but I didn't work out as well. It's just like, because I would like dare myself to do stuff like that, but it was always scary. Like, it's like I would like walk up, like, so for me, for example, like when I was in high school, like I didn't really know anybody, so I would like just randomly pick people and just walk up to them. But like it was very hit and miss. It was not like, it was very hit and miss.
I think it's something you do need to prepare yourself for, because so more recently with business school, I would ask people out on coffee dates, even though everything is super new. And if it doesn't get reciprocated, it doesn't get reciprocated. I do wonder if maybe being double decider helps with that. Where the potential rejection doesn't feel as bad. And to be fair, I felt like I was coming from a very, very solid base of like knowing who I am, because I had my husband at the time. I didn't have to worry about like, oh, am I giving out the wrong vibes? Like trying to date people, like I didn't have to worry about that. And so I think coming from, it did feel like I had built up my identity enough to be able to take on those kinds of hits like later on in life. And I'm just fortunate that maybe earlier in life it worked out more easily.
Oh, really cool. Yeah, okay. So so there are actually some similarities. That's funny. So you're gonna have to help me out. We already talked about this. So guys, okay, this is my fault. This was supposed to actually happen, what, 2 weeks ago?
Maybe 2 or 3 weeks or something like that.
2-3 weeks ago. Guess who was so demon SI? I forgot to put the actual episode on my calendar, guys. I've never done that before. It was crazy. So it's like she like texted me out of the blue. She's like, "Hey, are we still good?" I was like, "What are you talking about? Are we still good?" Like, so, because of that, all the prep kind of was on the back burner for a month. So it's like we're gonna do our best and talk about what we
want to play energy it out.
We'll play energy it. That's kind of what I'm trying to set up there. There's a lot going on here. So let's start with OP, right? Yeah. So let's start with how you like got into OP.
I was taking a leadership class in business school, and we were taking these like archetype tests and like, who are you as a leader type, and of course MBTI comes up, and I had taken an MBTI assessment in undergrad because it was part of like a management class as well. It's like understanding you and your style, and there was like a values test. So I pulled up my old results from undergrad. I was the way they give you the results is weightings, like where you tend to cluster. I was very heavily clustered as an ENFP. Wanted to dig into a little bit more what that means and what that is. So I went down this Reddit like train on ENFP. I even bought an ebook on like life survival guide for ENFPs. It was pretty decent. But that's when
Heidi Tribe one.
I would have to look it up.
Okay.
And you know, that got me on board of like, oh yeah, FI, like I know what that is, you know, like here I am. So with business school, I got a side shave. I'm growing it out now. It's like an awkward length here.
Yeah.
um, but the idea behind that was it's something I would have to maintain myself every 2 weeks. And it was like a reminder, you know, that, you know, do not recruit for the shiny jobs. Like I'm here to discover entrepreneurship and is it a good fit for me? Like very like identity. um, and then somewhere down the chain, there was a comment about OP. And when I read about its business model, like what it was trying to do and how it was doing it, I was like, interesting. Like there's something there. It feels like there's something here. So
Yeah.
I signed up for the classes. This was like 2018. Signed up for the classes. Um, recorded my typing video a handful of months later, but I actually didn't submit it until a year later. So I got typed on a year-old video because the blast, I thought it was blast last.
Okay.
I'm play, consume, blast, sleep. I'm also going way too far in this story now, but how I discovered it was through a Reddit comment that led me through all of this, and the approach that Dave and Shan had and the way they described it made a lot of sense to me. And the coins felt very, very real. So I've stuck with the classes ever since. That's not true. I decided to pull the plug on paying for the classes for now because I was treating it as a way to like fund Dave and Shan's work. They've clearly done well for themselves up until now. I wish they had a slightly different model. Like if you've, you know, paid up to a certain price, like threshold, then maybe it's more like a maintenance fee to get access to the library. Because I don't think I can really justify like the $20 a month, you know, after a long time of staying subscribed. So my plan is to, you know, batch it. I do want to. I'm super excited for Mark Manson. Anyway, I'm like chaos throwing shit at you now, but
yeah, it's okay.
Yeah,
that's okay. I'm used to it. You know, I like some of my best friends are SEs, so it's like I've like grown very accustomed to this talking style. I'm like, all right, let me just wait. You know.
So let me try to wrap it up.
Yeah.
Of like, you know, with OP, I've continued to see if there's a better framework out there, like, or it feels like I found something that is pretty real.
Yeah. That's good. So, talk to me a little bit about how you've been processing your type, because I feel like you've had it for a little while.
Yeah. Good point. When did I get my type back? I think it was mid 2020. So in processing my type, the sleep last was a bit of like a, wait, you mean I'm not blast last? Because my mentality really was blast is the hardest thing I would ever have to do. And then when they gave me my result, I was like, oh shit, like sleep is the hardest.
Okay.
Where it's not even, at least with blast, I recognize it as an area that I want to work on, need to work on, and like am willing to do some work around it. But with sleep, it just feels like it's a non-starter.
Yeah.
So that was when I was like, oh, okay, I can see that. And then with the sensor versus intuition, because I thought I didn't have, you know, the Myers-Briggs biases of like intuition's better than sensory, because I wasn't very involved in that space. But I think there was a part of me that was like, wait, I'm a sensor.
Right.
And then I watched my video back and like, you know, some things, and I was like, oh my goodness, like, yes, it's very, I talk about very real things. I'm using examples in the real world. My analogies don't get abusive. I try to use them because they're useful.
Right.
But it wasn't hard to accept. The double feminine makes a lot of sense. Yeah. What I'm actually not sure about this for you. Did you have like what was receiving your type like for you and processing that?
I mean, being like, I've always known I was on the ENFP quadra for sure. Like, I mean, there was definitely, I was like, well, why isn't this NI? Like, I went through the insecurity phase, I guess, is what I would call it. But I mean, even when I was doing like the more Myers-Briggs personality tests online, I always tested ENFP. Like, so it's like, or INFP or something, one of those two. So it's like, me being an ENFP wasn't the surprise. Me being a jumper, it took me a little bit to process, but like, I was like, okay, this makes way more sense. The sleep blast, I didn't fully get, but like I wasn't surprised by it. I think it was where the blast versus the consume that actually threw me off, because I initially was type play blast, or they were suspicious that I was play blast, and then they switched it. And so I was like, well, what's what? So that took a little bit, but I think that was maybe it, Yeah.
So like, was it because with being a jumper, was the tribe above self thing like easier to see afterwards, or was it?
Yeah, it's I'm like, I'm not the most like confident. Well, let me actually take a step back, because DI doesn't necessarily mean confidence. I tend to look for pingbacks before I look to myself, and I kind of knew that,
Yeah.
So yeah.
To me, it was fairly obvious because I, so my mom is very, life is about getting to know yourself. I suspect she's self above tribe. But from very young, I knew that there was a gap where I just had no idea how to even do it without it reflecting off something or somebody else. And that's why, like, with my consume, it feels so heavy. It's like I can only respond to something, and then through the response, try to pull out my identity and my patterns. I knew that it was there.
Yeah.
But I need to send out like an echo wave. I can't just do this.
No, that's how I feel. But yeah, that's a really good way of seeing that. Yeah, you have to do an echo back.
Yeah.
And the echo back, it's like once you get the echo back, it's like, is that really what I want?
Yeah, then you can know what actually resonates.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay, cool. Okay, so let's do this, because I know there's like a lot of topics, but like, so this conversation is going to be interesting, because like it really is evolving out of just a conversation that we had initially that was on our minds or on our hearts, about a month ago. So it's like, we're going to try and revisit and flesh that out a little bit. So the first thing was actually in relation to OP, I guess, as a community, or maybe even as a philosophy, in the sense of, so OP, one of the aspects of OP is it's a very deterministic model, right? Like that's kind of let me take a step back. The whole notion is that free will is kind of fake. It's like everyone is the default programs, right? It's like everyone is doing the default programs all the time. And one of the consequences that we were discussing initially about that is like, okay, how does this relate to typism or typesplaining, right? So did you want to refresh my memory of your stance on that?
Yeah, and maybe we'll take it in two steps, right? Because I think that covers like two parts. So this thing about determinism, and like defining our terms, I guess, and free will.
Yeah.
I think they have an old video on the YouTube channel about like, well, how does free will play into it, all that. My take on that, so it is, I guess you could say it's deterministic in that you have your function stack. There is no changing it. There is no, you don't, unlike with Myers-Briggs, you might identify as one type a decade ago and something else in this decade, is I think what a lot of people go through, as how they test as. But with OP, I think the analogy is like, this is the model and make of your car. Like it just is. Like these are the parts that you have. You can work on them and have them be better maintained. There are things that you can do with it through free will, but it doesn't change the model and make of your car. So I don't think that OP carries the philosophy of you don't have free will. It's more like you have your body is coded to operate a certain way. So your body will always want fat, sugar, and salt and the whole box of donuts. But you have free will to choose differently. Something that I grew up in a Christian household, and I've wrestled with this concept of like free will versus like God, and God has a plan, and it's a personalized plan. It's not, at least in the faith that I grew up in, it's it's not like, he put this sandbox in place and whatever happens. It's he's got a personal plan for each and every soul. And the way that I analogized it for my younger self, and I think it still holds, is it's kind of like having a pre-written adventure book, choose your adventure book. And so God, there are the books already written, the entire book. And all of the books somehow intersect with other people's choose your own adventure books. And there are consequences based on how all the interactions choose. So in that sense, it's possible where there has been a plan and there is free will baked into it.
Right. You're gonna tell me out.
So the paths have already been written.
Yeah.
Right. Like the paths aren't being like made up as you go along. It's not like an ongoing TV show. Like they knew where this was going, but the individual choices by individuals still they have a choice. They still have a choice. Just because the script has been written is not that it has to be. You don't have to pick one path or the other. You can still choose between the different paths that are laid out ahead of you.
But the lack of free choice is if you pick one path between the options, I guess, like the end point is kind of fixed.
Right. And I think the way that what OP is adding as a flavor onto this is unless you choose otherwise, there's a default. There is a default option where if you just hit next,
right,
you will end up, and that's the whole driving in circles analogy, And so free will is about, because not that the default option is bad, it's been designed in a certain way to lead to certain outcomes in a macro, I think is what Dave and Chan would describe as, how did humans evolve to be with all these different needs. But from the individual's perspective, you still have, is my default choice the one I really want to make, or do I want to change the bubble?
Yeah. Interesting. So, I mean, but I guess my question is like, even those options, it's like all those choices are binary though, right? Like it's really between your saviors and your demons, really.
I guess I haven't tried to marry those two. So like the choose your own adventure analogy would have been, my way of processing the world from when I was like, 8 or 10 years old, trying to understand God's plan and free will. And I guess when we bring it to OP and like our functions, it's more, I think functions as tools is a better fit as an analogy. And this is where I get a little bit lost if I haven't like really like slept on this. I'm not really sure where this leads, but so that's that's on the first part of like this topic of determinism. You are who you are. This is your programming. I guess where do you I don't remember what you were thinking about the concept of free will and our parts and
me personally. I haven't still processed that either. I would say I have always been biased towards there being some sort of free will, like, or at least something in you that could choose between the options, right? It's like, okay, you have your saviors and your demons. It's like if you're stuck in a situation, and I think your analogy is perfect because like if you're unconscious to what you're doing, then you're just skipping and you're just doing your default. I get that, right? So that's where it's the most deterministic, and I think that's true. But the moment you're made conscious of something, then you can choose between the options you have. Now, I guess for me, and I know I'm being really NT about this, what is made conscious to you, you may not have a choice in, right? There may be priming that led you to be conscious of certain things, and there may be certain things that like broke into your awareness that you had like
getting Darren Brown is
exactly. That was exactly what I was thinking of. So it's like the consciousness doesn't seem necessarily like it has anything to do with free will. Not really. Like it's so okay. I'm rambling. I grew up in a Christian background, so it's almost like, to use my Christian experience as a framework, it's like you start off in a default blind free will state, and then it's almost like grace wakes you up. There's an outside element that wakes you up, and then once you're awake, then you can choose.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm on board with what you've said so far. What you said about I think exactly what you said. Consciousness is not about what is revealed to you, but it's just more of like a heightened state of activation, which without you wouldn't have even reached a level to be able to make a choice, because you haven't reached like activation energy, like high school chemistry, you know. And it's something that I'm at the stage with my faith / like knowledge about the world and like how I want to think about it. I'm working up the energy to examine things a little bit more deeply with my more secular like mindset now, I guess. I haven't really thought about / I also don't know if I'm ready to necessarily share about it on a public platform. So something so no as and I understand this is me reminding myself that I don't have to martyr my own experience for other people's learning. I don't know if this is something that you've experienced, where if you're trying to, you know, figure something out, at least for me, it's like, okay, fine, like I will bring my personal shit to the table so we can work through that, since the rest of you aren't, you know, because I need to process it out loud.
Okay. Absolutely.
I forget where I was going with this. See,
so
you know,
gotta stay. So hold on. So you were mentioning you're processing. You're at this stage where you're now coming back to certain of your presuppositions with your secular mindset.
Yeah. And so when it comes to choice and what you're conscious of, I think there's some level of like, once you understand that there are options in one area of your life, to then recognize that it is available in other parts of your life, you just can't see it. So the whole blind spot thing, where you either have enough experience like with life such that you know it's like, okay, I know I can't see half the board, but it's there. So you don't have to only rely on what has been revealed to you in like the sensor way in these areas of your life, but being able to make the connection of like, okay, if I can see it in this part of my life, does it apply to other parts? What do I do to figure that out?
I'm not sure if I followed all that. But it's okay.
That's okay. I am.
It's okay.
This is not yet a blaster lesson.
Thank you. That's a good caveat. I should actually say that now. I'm gonna start saying that. This is not yet blast ready. There you go. All right. So, you know, that's really good. Yeah, consciousness. It's almost like it comes from outside, and it's like a gift, and a curse. But like it's not like your fault. It's not like your fault that you're conscious. You know?
And I think this is connected to the whole like hero's journey thing, like wanting to stay a child. We talked about this, right? Like I think you identified as Spider-Man like right off the bat. For people who are watching who are not sure what we're talking about, there's a rubric of like, you know, is child wants to stay a child? Is child wants to be an adult? Is an adult wants to be a child? Is adult but actually wants to be an adult,
right?
And it's the lack of congruence that makes it feel like you are not at peace with.
It's like you suffer. So for example, like the Spider-Man archetype, or like it's like the sidekick almost archetype, which is so embarrassing to say, but it's like a child in reality. So it's like everyone else is experiencing them as a child, but they are experiencing themselves as an adult. So it's like they're struggling because they're trying to save everyone and they're trying to do everything, but on the outside, it's very different, you know. Anyway, and it's so where are we going with that? Sorry. God damn it.
Maybe we need to rely on chat to help us keep us on.
Oh
some sort of
God.
NI track.
Yeah. I want.
So
Oh, yeah.
We've talked about determinism / how much does free will play into it, and then
Yep.
this part about typesplaining, or maybe getting locked into to me, this is the whole like pre-existing prejudices / like assumptions and stereotypes, tropes about the different
Yeah.
types. And I think that conversation of ours was or I don't remember who brought it up, but I think I was thinking about it because Raja had recently talked about how he would like the OP community, especially on Facebook, to be a little bit more cognizant of how they talk about their functions and what it may or may not limit in terms of what they can do, because I think he's trying to remind us that like you are not limited by your function stack or your type, and don't put limits on other people for their function stack or their type. And just to maybe to give a little bit of context, this is also during a time I'm not super active in the groups. This is another like topic, I guess, where I feel some sort of responsibility to be aware, but then also realize that like, you know, there's only so much time on this earth that we have, and unless you're actually working towards something, what does that mean? So disclaimer, I don't know everything about what's going on, you know, but what was brought to my awareness, I think there's some tensions around being self-typed and officially typed. And when I say tensions, I mean it sounds like there are people who start to feel excluded if they are not officially typed. Would you say that's fair? As like a thing that's going as a thing that's like going on, or maybe not, but it's actually going on, but that people believe that.
Are you asking me a DE question right now? Is that fair? Do you agree? Oh my God.
You got me.
Yeah.
Oops.
So continue.
And so I'm trying, and this it came up in the early days of the Discord as well, where I think it was Prem or whoever was the admin had very strong feelings about, or values, doesn't have to be feelings, it's like it was a value to not exclude people just because they haven't been officially typed. And I get where that comes from. At the same time, as somebody who was looking to understand the parts better, all of that, I would prefer if people self-labeled. You don't have to, but I would always self-label as self-typed, double feminine, NETE, blast, whatever my stack was. I can't rattle that off now. But I felt a responsibility whenever I commented on the Facebook group to say I am self-typed, so that whoever was reading my stuff could take whatever grain of salt they wanted to. And so I think that's where I currently land, which is like, you know, if I could set up the etiquette rules of a particular OP space to encourage people, especially when you're looking for responses. I do think it feels a little exclusionary when you start soliciting in a post like official types, only types respond. Like, I don't think that, it doesn't mean that your viewpoint isn't valid. But to be conscious of, if you're looking for representation, to make it ST clear.
There you go. So the short story is just do our saviors.
Exactly.
Okay. That was oh no.
That was what all this was about.
Oh my God. Well, there you go. That's nicely, at least, you know.
Right. What are your thoughts around like this topic of not pathologizing functions or types, and
or pathologizing people who are self-typed?
Yes.
Oh my God. Okay. Well, not pathologizing, meaning like pathologizing. Remind me of how you're defining pathologizing, because I have like a certain definition in my head.
Yeah, actually, I would be interested in the dictionary.
Sure. Yes, ST that for me, please.
Yeah. So pathologizing is to regard or treat someone or something as psychologically abnormal or unhealthy.
Abnormal or unhealthy. Okay. Yeah, I think my point of view is that the ideal is that everyone should be treated with that grain of salt. Like we should be looking at like even people who are typed or who say they're officially
I like the
typed,
term formally typed, actually.
or formally typed.
Yeah.
Like first of all, they could be fucking lying. Excuse my language, but like they could be. So it's like regardless, you have to be wary a little bit and be like, okay, let's take a look at this. But as for like, you know, people who are in the Facebook groups or things like that, I guess I admittedly have a bias against people who are self-typed because it's like, you know, especially when they start using anecdotes, I'm like, I can't listen to this. Like it's like I have no clue what I'm looking at, you know. So I will admit that I have a bias against content that's coming from that. But as for like demonizing them or pathologizing them as abnormal, it's like it's very rare for someone to come across as like totally abnormal to me, you know. So it's like that part. It's where they're like this. So this is where I guess I draw the line. If you start making posts like, "Oh, my mom's a blaster and she abused me, and so all blasters are bad," comment below if you also think blasters are bad. I'm exaggerating, but I've seen posts like that. And I'm like, all right, this is where the line needs to be drawn because it's like, first of all, you're not even good at typing. So it's like, why should I believe you? You know? And then second, it's like that over generalization and demonization of someone else. I think it amplifies conflict where there shouldn't be.
And it doesn't have to be demonizing. It could be also putting them up on a pedestal.
Well, I admittedly do that, which I admittedly do.
Okay.
I still have a problem. Like I inherited that from the MBTI days of like NISE, that axis specifically. I'm serious. It's still in there somewhere. Where it's like, so, but yeah, I think that also, it's weird because like I feel like logically I should be against that, but it's like, I guess when I see that I have less pushback just because it's positive.
Yeah. And it's hard to pull apart, right? Because, you know, it's, you know, the principle is don't elevate or put down, but they are different flavors.
Yeah.
And each should be appreciated in its own space.
Yeah.
And I think so that idea gets very conflated because and that's why I think the work needs to be done on an individual level of like, oh, am I, you know, holding something up to a standard, but at the same time not putting something else down. I haven't fully.
Steph, I'm not gonna lie to you, Steph. Yeah. I'm actually gonna write this down. I've officially decided if I see someone leaning into a type, I'm calling them the fuck out. This sounds like TE to me. This whole conversation sounds like TE to me. I just realized because it's like, yeah, like no one thing should be raised up above any other thing. They're both equally useful tools. So what's the problem? You know,
I want for me, I think like where I'm feeling like a masculinist, which is my like I have masculine demon FI. I think what the value that I'm pushing is just like be consistent, be deliberate about what you are holding up or celebrating or not. And again, it's a big ask. Let me try to make this. It's so funny because so going back to like, you know, thinking, you know, first impressions, maybe strong SI. That was me thinking I was doing my demons, right? Because I thought I was any.
I was about to channel change. I feel you. That's all I'm gonna say. I feel you. I feel you. For real. It's so hard. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So before, just to wrap up on this, or you know, with this topic of pathologizing, I think when I was talking in the earlier part of this section, I don't think I was thinking of it as like abnormal or unhealthy. I was thinking of it as more like putting on stereotypes or artificial limits on functions and function stacks. The analogy that comes up is, there's a deaf YouTuber, and she gets comments like, "Oh, but you don't sound deaf," and it's like, you understand that like the way that I talk, there is some connection, right? Because I think, from what I understand, when you if you're born hard of hearing, there might be a little bit more challenge in like how you articulate, because you've never really heard those voices before. I'm not an expert on this. Don't quote me on this. But the main point is, for her, that's not the case. And so like saying, that has no connection. Then this was part of a conversation they was having with a blind YouTuber, Molly Burke. And she was saying like, yeah, the comment I get a lot of times like, "Oh, you're too pretty to be blind." Or like, "Your eyes are so like, like you have great eye contact. You can't be blind." Like, it's like, excuse me, like what? So
you're connecting those things. You're seeing the same pattern here. So
and I'm working very hard at it.
There you go. This is a channel change, but Steph, thank you. I've decided moving forward, so I'm trying not to be spicy from a rude standpoint. I'm trying. But to compensate, I've decided to call people the fuck out if I see them doing their saviors. I've decided. This is, come on, Steph.
I'll be there to mitigate, to feminine tribe, to round out your edges where I need to, because I think the value that we're holding dear is something I don't know what I'm articulating it yet as, but it's there and it's important. So yeah, anyone else?
So let me see if I can fake blast black what you're saying. So underneath the Te-fairses of what you're saying, underneath it is, you are noticing this pattern of, I mean, basically this is what Dave and Shan say. It's like what they call like the whole anecdotes thing. It's like, "Oh, but you did this, so therefore that," right? "Oh, you gave an example, therefore you're a censor." Or, "Oh, you were really controlling, therefore you're a blaster, and therefore we should not like you, and therefore you're the one." Yeah. So you're I guess you're tracking that pattern. Is that fair?
I think it's in that space.
Oh, so okay, so
yeah.
Okay, so if it's in that space, is there anything else to that pattern that I'm not seeing?
I don't think it's that you're not seeing it. I don't think I have a clear idea of what it is. So it feels like it's there in that space, but I don't have it like blast clear to just pull it out. So maybe
do you mind if we channel change from a meta standpoint? So because I don't have NI. So as you're trying to find this pattern, like what is going through your mind? Like what's going through your experience right now to find this pattern? Like when I asked you that question, like how did that go through your processing?
Yeah. My first instinct is I need to go consume more because only then will I have enough sensory, and maybe maybe different sensory will help me shape my masculine NI.
Right.
But I think I'm not sure what the right balance is, and I know different people have talked about this when you're moving through your animal stack, that it's not necessarily about doing the lower filter animal at the expense of the higher ones. It's just you gotta pass it through the stack either faster or just more, just like shove it in, right?
Right.
And it feels more natural to me to do the shoving it in. That's why like when I've been processing this whole like self-type versus not, I've been looking out for people who are on the autism spectrum that are putting out their own content about how they feel about self-diagnosed autism.
Mm-hmm.
And I am starting to build that NI through that, but I the way I would describe it is, it feels like I want to get at something. It's really hard to get at it directly. So let me find an adjacent thing, or maybe something that is more established, because OP is, newer, like in its baby stages, but the disability community, like all the struggles that they've been through, that's much more established, and there are clearer thoughts and the spectrum of thoughts and reactions in there. So I go consume that. I can tell you a little bit more about what I've learned, but I don't think it's quite yet ready. But I think it's in that vein of.
So, wow. Do you mind if I ask a follow-up question? Like,
Go for it. Yeah.
this is my consume, so I know I'm doing my saviors. Okay, guys. My follow-up question is: so when you're confused about something in the OP community, like so for example, the self-type, do you like? Is it just an underlying assumption that the pattern will remain the same across communities?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And that
Okay.
there is something to be mined from other experiences that maybe I can't get to directly, but I might get like hints, or that might set me off on a different path that I can then try to
just come back to the OP community with. Wow. Well, I mean, what's that been like for you? Like just doing this, like I don't know what to call it, but like seeing the same pattern in multiple communities. So it's like how was that? How do you experience that? Like practice, like
I think it feels like, it's some version of like overconsume and need to blast. Because I also get stuck. So like I'm trying to process something, but I don't really how. So I'm gathering, and then it's like I can't actually produce something.
Yeah.
And the missing pieces that the only way I can make progress on it is either I have a deliverable, so it's like a paper that I'm working on or something, or having a conversation where it needs to be maybe a little bit more crystallized.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's why when I got my type back as like, demon and I, where other people are responsible for forming the pattern, I'm like, oh holy shit, that is exactly what I do. It's like I can feel the pattern, but I it's very like
Yeah. Wow.
What does that feel like for any SI?
So let me. I'm gonna probably, but like, I'm gonna use my saviors to figure out what the fucking question is. I'm gonna NT the hell out of the fucking question because I'm confused.
You have my permission.
Okay, thank you. How is any SI doing? How is because we have the same animal stack, right?
Play, consume, blast, sleep. Yeah.
And we both have double masculine sleep.
Yes.
So the parts are the same. It's literally just the any part, right?
Yep.
Okay. So let me actually reverse engineer this. I definitely also experienced I have that visceral feeling of there's something that needs to be organized, or there's a structure that needs to be put in place. I feel this a lot. I feel this in the OP community. I feel this at work. I feel this in my own life. It's this constant scream, like silently. It's like a silent scream of, it's a silent scream of this needs to do this. But like you said, it's like the problem is like I don't know what that is. How could I possibly know what that is? So it's like I will run through unconsciously, mind you, most of the time, I will run through my NE and just go through like, well, okay, this is what like NETE. This is what Peterson said about this, and this is what Dave and Shan said about this. And it's like I'm going through all of their patterns to try and find. I'm such a bullshitter. I'm going through all of their patterns to try and magically find this structure. And sometimes it gives insight. See, this is what's fucked up about NE. It will give me insight. So I will get the problem. So I'll NT get the problem, but the sensory has not been organized still.
What you just described is you got to the NI, right? You've managed to narrow down the NE into something. You got to an NI, but there's still no sensory behind it. For me, it's what you were seeing, or a lot of my posts, right? Like, it's like, oh, look, like I can organize, I can get it to an SI, but what's the N?
Right. Wow. I feel bad for some of my friends, especially because like I try and process, but I'm probably still doing NE. It's just fucking ridiculous.
I know. I feel you.
Yeah.
I feel you.
I don't know how to like so much like you. It's like I don't know how to go straight to the SI. I don't think I've ever been able to do that.
Yeah, and maybe that's not how we're supposed to work. Like, maybe that's not how our machine was built, right? Like, maybe it is more about, okay, now we've done the job of like, for you getting it to the NI, for me getting it to the SI. Now find the pattern or find the sensor. Stay in that. Don't get stop pulling in more.
Yeah, just
stare at
hold
it,
it.
stare at it. Yeah, that's the part that I feel where I get like, unless there's something else holding my feet to the fire to find the N in my SI, because I will go SE. I'm like, okay, now work. Here's the SI. It's beautiful. Category is beautiful. Blah blah blah. And then it's like, okay, now what is the N? And then I want to go gather more S. You know, like
Right.
yeah.
Right. Same thing with me. Yeah, it's like it's. I guess I've never framed it that way. Like I get it down to an NI. I guess I do.
Question mark?
Question
That's
mark?
how it feels for me. It feels like I can get it to an SI.
Yeah.
But then I still hand it off. It's like, okay, I've already narrowed down.
You know what? I'm a bullshitter. I 100% do that. So a good example is game night. I'm not doing game night anymore, and this is doing game night. So it's like I came up with the idea because I saw. Yeah. It's like this. Someone needs to put this here. I don't know what SI needs to be put in place, but there needs to be this needs to exist in the community. And so I narrowed it down to, okay, there's marketing and there's setup and there's this. And then Anissa graciously, thank God, she's such a good human being. I was like, I'm fucking done. And then I left.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm over it. You know? It's just fuck, you know, it's just stressful. You know? So yeah, okay. But see, so maybe let me ask you this. So what I just did, so like just we're going super meta. I feel like what I just did right now is me taking a pattern and finally bringing it down to a sensory example. Now, do you do that?
Yeah.
Okay. How do you do that with NI?
When I'm forced to give an overview of what I'm trying to talk about.
Right. Yeah.
Like that's literally like it's the, so I think Shan talks about, and in my video, her, you know, when she was giving me my type, she was like, one of the things that to practice as a SE shit gatherer is stay on topic, like sit in it, right? Because then you catch yourself in the, I'm just giving you sensory, like you're clearly getting bored, you know, like I need to, or confused. I think you need to get to confusing people, to boring people, to aha.
Yeah.
Or it feels that way to me.
You know, I relate to that. Maybe not the well, I think I also confuse people, but like the staying on topic is a huge, like the person who's watching us, they know who they are. I'm so sorry for this morning because I was channel changing to fucking hell and I thought I was doing SI. What? You know, it's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
So okay. Is there anything else related to that?
We have here as like, you know, a bullet point of like counter argument of grow and give.
Where are we at?
So OP determinism.
Where? Oh, in the actual doc. I was like,
sorry. Yes.
Yes. Okay.
The actual doc in my sensor. And
how did we get here? Counter argument, grow and give. I guess that might be a counter argument in favor of free will.
Yep, in favor of free will, and I think, in favor of. I'm forcing this. I think I just wanted to get to, you know, pathologizing, where the actual definition of it is to treat something as abnormal or unhealthy. I think that's just embedded into, if you don't recognize the function axis.
Yeah.
It does it, or actually never mind the axis. You could share the same axis, but the whole savior demon thing, if it's not the same stack or the same order, like it is like, wait, me asking you to consume is like you asking me to blast. Oh.
Right.
So that would feel just abnormal. So just, you know, but don't be any under disillusion that your mode of operating is normal, I guess, is like
exactly. Like what's the you have to define what type is normal, basically.
Yeah, and I think sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, I'm trying to understand a little bit more about like with the autism community, and like, you know, learning a bit more about that and the whole neurodiversity. There's a paradigm shift. There's an excellent TED talk that I came across that articulates this much better than I am doing. But it's like, what is normal? Like, stop, what does that even mean? And this connects to the entire conversation about representation and diversity and all these other identity things that are important.
Yeah.
Not yet blast ready, so we can challenge.
Okay, so here's what we're gonna do.
Yeah.
We're gonna do. I'm gonna challenge you, okay?
Okay.
So guys who's watching, we're gonna shift to Q&A in about a minute or two. But before we do that, Steph, I would like for you to give an overview of what we just discussed.
Yeah, can I censor clarify? I do want to help with timestamps. Total
cool.
sidestep. I would love to help you with timestamps, and I'll submit that along. So this, I guess, is practice.
Thank you. I'm doing that shit. Yeah.
So I think what we covered is. I feel like I'm gonna get like a C on this assignment.
C's better than F, you know.
Maybe it's gonna be an F. You know, I'm too generous with my own grading. I think the nugget that we got out of this is there is such thing as free will. I'm asserting like my F, my FI. There is such thing as free will. Don't confuse, celebrating or demonizing something as, be careful when you do that. Check in with yourself. Is this really what you want to perpetuate in the community? And is there a nuance that you can do better at clarifying before putting a thought out there? And when it comes to, gather, over, organize, and sleep last problems, get it down to staring at it after you've gotten it organized so that you can come up with the pattern or the sensor, depending on which is your last function.
That's really good advice, actually. Yeah. Just stare.
And you have the choice. You have the free will to sit in that. And
yeah. Wow. Okay, really good. Thank you so much. So, Q&A time. If anyone wants Q&A, Steph is a cool person. Okay. So we gotta ask them questions if you have them. Okay, so I think there were at least 2. Okay, you ready?
Yeah.
So, Mr. Dog, hi. Have you had any unusual emotional responses or experiences with archetypes? So, for example, reptilians, cars, sea monsters. This seems to cluster around and at times relate to type.
I'm not super sure what the question is getting at. Do you have an idea?
Well, okay, if I had to guess,
Mm-hmm.
have you had any unusual emotional responses or experiences with archetypes? So, for me, I immediately think of the context of dreams, 1, and then projecting onto other people, 2. So those 2 categories. So have you had any unusual dreams related to archetypes, let's say, for example?
Oh, dreams is another thing. In that I dream lucidly pretty much most of the time.
What?
Yeah, so this thing about free will, it came into back in my mind. I guess it's a good time to bring it up.
Oh my God.
Sort of. Where since I was little and nightmares are a thing, I figured out that you can just like jump out a window, like to end the dream, just jolt yourself out of it. So I would actively start choosing that, like if something got to be too scary. But I was also like, I don't know which started first, right? Like when did I become aware that I am dreaming? Like, I'm not scared that this is real life. But then that would transition to jumping out a window to ending the dream to I can kind of fly. I can kind of like glide fly, which is kind of cool. And then with some recurring nightmares, there's actually one that I remember in particular, because I think it was one of the earlier instances where I was like, oh, I can control what's happening in my dreams. The dream is that I'm alone in my house and there's this witch that's just chasing me. And by the time I get to the ground floor to try and run out, this floor is just covered with snakes. You just you can't like step through them. And then when that nightmare was recurring, it got to a point where I was like, I'm going to get to the kitchen. I'm going to grab a knife. I'm going to kill this bitch. And then the rest of my dream was like hiding the body in my neighbor's attic and like hiding from the cops.
Oh my god.
It wasn't particularly graphic or anything, but like that was the
That's
sequencing.
so intense.
But it was a very like it's kind of cool. And then I went through a period where I would pray for just no dreams because I just wanted to sleep. And like that was real, where I just did not dream for a long time. And then when dreams started to come back, there was this like, I'm in dreamland. Let's see what happens.
Yeah.
What in response to Mr. Dog's question, with like Reptilian, like it's just like cool concept art to me. And like, you know, this representation of like dystopia, like alternate universe. Like, this is not very ST clear, but it gets me in a space of like, ooh, like it feels cool and exciting, like dangerous, you know, like yeah.
Hopefully that answers your question, Guy. I have one question before we go to like keep going. So with your double masculine sleep, just given how intense that dream was, how like, you know, how intense does your inner world get then?
Today, not so much. Or at least like in adulthood, like it feels like I am doing a lot more processing through the outside world. So or the stuff that builds up, like, you know, I have friends and family who I can like, and now with OP, it does really help to know that it's something I have to process.
Yeah.
When you asked about like, you know, how deep and dark does your inner world get, it is true, not so much now, but like I recently joined the OP songs group. For people who don't know, there is a OP songs Facebook group. Because I think there's a resurgence of like emo pop punk happening in the world out there, and I'm like here for it and I'm excited. But that genre of music, like, so I went through a Linkin Park phase when I was 13. So like there is an angst, like where it feels like super like aggressive and like I don't know how else to articulate this. How do you experience double masculine?
Wait, did you answer the question first before
I think I did.
Stare at it.
Oh.
Stare at it. Give me an overview.
Your question was, how do I experience a double masculine inner world?
Yes, is it still as intense? And you started by saying it now it isn't, but before there was an angst.
Yes, and it comes through, or I feel it more through like music and visual art and I guess all the NF, which are my double demons. Yeah. Too funny.
Interesting. Okay, I mean, do you want me to answer it or do you want to keep going?
I'm super interested.
My inner world is still super intense. It tears me apart is how I feel, because it's like, first of all, it's definitely SF. It's not NF. It's definitely about like just physicality and things that I enjoy, or things that I, you know, or things that stress me out related to at least the sensory world, like emotional things that stress me out in the sensory world, or I guess, sorry, things in the sensory world that stress me out. Let's reverse that. And then also just like there's a side of me that is just this really compressed, intense version of myself, but I'm so insecure of expressing that or sharing that it like rips its way through my psyche as it comes out. It's how I would express that, you know?
That, whatever you just described, like hit something here. I think I'm currently not experiencing that because I have kind of like distracted myself from not dealing with it. But if I were to really ask myself, because for me, it's like okay, who am I and what is my future? What do I want my future to be like with the FINI? Like there is an angst if you, and I guess you're doing a better job of like staring at it. I've put it aside for a little bit, and I felt it a lot during business school, because that was like the, what am I going to do about my career and my, you know, like, and then now coming out of it, it was, it's COVID. Like, let me just deal with life.
Yeah.
But what you articulated, like that, I get what you're saying.
Yeah, it's torture,
Mm-hmm.
Fun times. All right, let's find another question. Let me distract us.
Yeah.
God. Yay. All right, so here we go. Gray. Hi. What do each of you love most about the opposite observer axis? All right, it's your turn.
I think gathering the intuition gets me excited, right? Because it's like, oh wait, what patterns have I been missing?
Yeah.
And maybe because I think there's something about picking up on a favorite NI. And so if I can borrow other people's patterns and it's like, oh yeah, like that one, like mine now, I actually don't really play the game of typing people in my real life, so it's harder for me to like pick out people with the SI axis that I can then like answer this question more concretely with. But yeah, I guess I'll have to think about that a little bit more.
Yeah. I think for me, what do I love most about the NESI axis? About my own axis? About the NISE axis? The most. Okay, so that's actually kind of hard. I think they pay attention. They're tracking people. I think SE and they track, and they have very deep understandings of actual like what's going on. Like they're actually tracking what's going on. Is how I feel with NISE. Is how I feel. And whether it's the NI or the SE, it actually doesn't matter. It's like that's what's valuable to me. It's like it helps me see what's going on in the world. It's like, oh, okay, I had no idea this was going on. Like, for example, OP, it's like I had no idea this was happening. Like, it's like I didn't know people were paying attention to this. But like once I got into the community, it turned out a lot of people were paying attention to stuff like this. I was like, oh, okay, this is cool. So it's like so it expands my awareness of like the world,
Yeah, I think in that sense, what NESI does, at least what I think it does for me without thinking about this more, is expanding my universe, but just on the different realm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, really good. I think that's it. So I think you did a really great job doing the overview. So I'm not gonna make you suffer through that. So closing up. So really appreciate it, Steph. I know it's been a little while.
No, I had a great time.
This was fun. I thought this was fun. Stay on for a little bit after because I do want to talk to you about something.
Yeah.
But everyone else, thank you so much. Especially everyone who came through on the live chats. Basically, thanks. I'm gonna keep posting content. Obviously subscribe if you want to see when these things are coming out. Also, I guess I'll do like a mini announcement. I will be announcing the trajectory of my channel probably within the next 3 weeks. So there's gonna be a little bit OE changes. Okay, so just be on the lookout for that. So that is what's gonna happen. So Steph, just stay on, but everyone else, thank you so much, and I will see you on the next one. Take care, guys.